Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A record wildfire season and with it, record spending.
This government seems to not be willing to make any adjustments whatsoever.
An update on the province's books and the criticism coming with it. Plus, why the types of trees we're planting in BC could be making the effects of climate change worse. And a memorable moment. For BC Boys' first concert.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. A newly released document suggests police in BC have been concerned about the safety of another Sikh activist in this province. The man is from the same Gurdwara as Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the activist gunned down outside his Gurdwara in June. A murder Canada says India was involved in. Let's go live now to our Tanya Fletcher for more on this. Tanya, take us through the latest developments.
Yeah, Anita, Gurmeet Singh Toor was allegedly warned by law enforcement about threats to his own life. This is according to a newly disclosed duty to warn document that Toor says was delivered to his house by officials about a month ago. It's addressed to him and reads, "Police have determined by way of one or more investigative avenues that your life may be in peril." Adding, at this time, we are unable to provide you with specific details of the threat. Now, CBC has reached out to RCMP multiple times to confirm that this duty to warn was in fact issued. So far, no official confirmation from law enforcement. But we did speak to Toor himself about it. Take a listen to what he told us through a translator.
He feels that he is, after the warning, he is keeping more aware of everything, of his surroundings, and trying his best to stay safe.
Are you worried?
Yeah, fikr to hai, of course.
Now, Toor is a senior member of the management committee at the same Surrey Gurdwara that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was president of. Nijjar was shot dead in the driveway just outside the Gurdwara at the end of June. Now, this new letter is dated nearly 2 months after the killing on August 24th. Weeks before, there was a non-binding vote held in BC in support of an independent Sikh state known as Khalistan. The Indian government denies any involvement in Nijjar's death. That same government, by the way, has viewed him as a terrorist. And the fallout, of course, from Canada's accusation has led to the collapse of relations between the two countries. Each has since sent a diplomat home. India has also stopped processing visas for Canadians. And the group Sikhs for Justice is calling on Canada to expel India's High Commissioner to Canada. Anita?
Tanya Fletcher live tonight. Thank you. Let's now go to India, where an election looms over the country, and that's made the crusade for Khalistan a hot-button issue, even as support for the movement in Punjab remains low. Our South Asia correspondent, Salima Shivji, has more from Punjab, where people are nervous.
The holiest of temples for Sikh pilgrims, golden in the afternoon light, a place of devotion and to capture memories. The songs religious and spiritual. But this was also the site of violence and turmoil nearly 40 years ago. An insurgency of armed Sikh separatists fighting for an independent state called Khalistan occupied the temple. Indian soldiers laid siege, eventually storming the holy site. Thousands of Sikhs died in the riots that followed, the pain still raw in Punjab. And yet, many here flatly reject the idea of a Sikh state.
I'm proud to feel an Indian.
Like Amanpal Singh, who's more worried about the economy.
No, ma'am, there is no Khalistani movement in Punjab. There is a need of the right now, the employment.
A deep concern that ripples through the heart of Punjab, an area that many young people have abandoned to go study abroad. Even if the hot topic of discussion these days is how Ottawa is accusing New Delhi of having a hand in the shooting death of a Canadian Sikh separatist on Canadian soil. What even is Khalistan, Sardur Singh says. We don't know, it's all politics, and we are the ones who suffer. This man was a police officer in the 1980s when anti-Sikh riots gripped the capital. There were dead bodies in the streets, Naseeb Singh Sangna says. Many don't remember the dark days. Why would we want to return to that unrest? There is a fierce anger here at the Indian government and a sense that Punjab has been slighted and not given its due. but also the sense that fighting for Khalistan isn't the answer.
I think there is no need to repeat the demands of Khalistan. We are happy.
Happy as part of India, less happy to be caught in a political game for votes, people here say, by India's ruling BJP, intent on deepening divides.
Near elections, they have just an election ploy. Let's talk about Khalistan. Let's create a mess in the people.
We stand for...
There is a section of Sikh society in Punjab that's still fighting, and they argue that support for their movement is strong but silent.
Over here, there is a fear of crackdown. There is a fear of harassment. There is a fear of being booked under draconian laws, which is not in the case in Canada, UK and USA. Whatever we see in diaspora, that is the reflection of the movement in Punjab.
So many people here tell me they fear the power of social media to exaggerate support for Khalistan. They worry that all Sikhs are being branded Khalistanis, terrorists. And most say there's a clear disconnect between how they see the fight for an independent state and how the Sikh diaspora sees it. A view frozen in time.
Abruptly came to an end in 1992-93.
Even though support for Khalistan in Punjab collapsed in the early 90s, says this expert, the diaspora clings to a past that's no longer.
They don't go by the logic. Sometimes they go by the history. Sometimes they go by that glorious period. Okay, that was there. But things have changed a lot.
Changed and evolved, with other more pressing concerns now top of mind. A Sikh state for those here, no longer a priority.
That's the CBC's Salima Shivji reporting from Amritsar tonight. Well, a record wildfire season in BC has led to record spending with a ballooning projected deficit for the province. It's now at $6.7 billion, $2.5 billion more than projected in the budget. As Mayor Baines reports, the provincial government says services won't be cut despite the rising deficit.
Finance Minister Katrina Conroy revealed the province's first quarter fiscal update today. Top of mind, BC's recent wildfire season.
We are seeing record wildfire response costs, and we will spend what's required to fight the fires and keep people safe.
The province is projected to spend almost $1 billion this year on its response. Falling natural gas revenues have also led to an increase of $2.5 billion in the projected deficit. But Conroy says there are no plans to cut back the province's spending.
At this time, what we're doing is we're going to keep providing services to people the way we have been since 2017.
While the opposition party isn't critical of wildfire spending, BC United says better fiscal management is needed now.
This government seems to not be willing to make any adjustments whatsoever.
BC United says the province should be taking more prudent measures, especially as costs to build new infrastructure rise.
Remember, this update does not include the billion-dollar cost overrun for the Surrey Hospital. We're fully expecting that the Burnaby Hospital of the same scope and scale.
However, the province has $5.5 billion in contingencies and $700 million available to respond to unanticipated expenses. The financial picture also revealed a big difference in housing expectations. While the housing minister was setting targets this week, 10 of the largest municipalities have been ordered to build more than 60,000 new units of housing over the next 5 years. The finance ministry isn't as ambitious, projecting about 42,000 new housing units per year, not much higher than the current average.
Well, right now we're being fairly prudent with our projections because of, as the staff have said, there's issues with labor supply and supplies.
There is more bad news. The fiscal update expects interest rates to stay high for a longer period during 2024. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
The surge in international migration is driving Canada's population growth rate to heights not seen in almost 70 years. As of July this year, the number of non-permanent residents living in Canada was up by 46% compared to the same time last year. That's the largest year-to-year increase in that population on record. The overall population growth here in BC is just over 3%. Well, the province is ordering some of BC's biggest municipalities to build 60,000 net new homes over the next 5 years. Close to half of those, about 29,000, are in Vancouver. But a housing advocate says that won't make much of a difference.
The Vancouver numbers, frankly, are not really an increase over what Vancouver has been doing. So they're, in that sense, they're quite disappointing. What we have been doing hasn't been working. And this, I was surprised. A lot of people were surprised by these numbers. We thought it would mark more of a change from the status quo. And unfortunately, it's not a particular, it's barely an increase over what we have been doing.
You can see the full list of municipalities being ordered to build homes by the province on our website, cbc.ca/BC. SFU's Teaching Support Staff Union is set to strike tomorrow. They have 3 demands: increased wages to reflect the cost of living, a stop to uncompensated work, and pensions for sessional instructors. The union's most recent collective agreement expired on April 30th, 2022. The decision to strike comes after 19 months of failed collective bargaining.
We've seen that the employer is still unwilling to bargain meaningfully with us on our fundamental issues, and so we need to take more serious job action. We need to escalate.
The TSSU has 1,600 members, including teaching assistants, sessional instructors, and research assistants. They will stop all work, including tutorials, lectures, and grading tomorrow morning. Indigenous leaders from across the province are renewing a call to close salmon farms. Yasmin Gandam is looking at the community concern that the federal government may be weakening its stance on protecting the sacred species.
123 First Nations gathering earlier today worried about the future of salmon in BC. The fish represent an integral piece of their culture and history.
It brings us together as families, sitting around tables or in smokehouses, talking to each other, talking about our culture, reinforcing who we are and how we're all interconnected to each other, to the salmon, to the environment, to the habitat.
The leaders say recent documents from Fisheries and Oceans Canada have them concerned the government may be pulling back on protecting salmon, approving 3 fish farm expansion projects between the years of 2019 and 2022.
Fish farms are certainly one of those biggest stressors and impacts that must be dealt with.
The closing of the farms has been a major issue of debate for years, with the majority of First Nations, as well as many scientists and environmental groups, saying the pens are linked to the transfer of disease to salmon, while the industry says close to 5,000 people rely on the farms for jobs.
Create employment across the province where we see reconciliation occur with the vast majority of First Nations. We see very clear environmental benefits, but most importantly, we get to see a sustained, focused effort to rehabilitate wild salmon.
And it's not just the Indigenous community who are concerned. The tourism industry also speaking out against open net pen fish farms.
If salmon were to disappear, the supernatural British Columbia brand and the tourism industry would crumble.
The First Nations leaders say government has failed to maintain salmon stocks. They're demanding not only the closure of open net salmon farms, but also for the Prime Minister to follow through on his promise to transition open net cage fish farms to land-based closed containment fish farming by 2025. We've reached out to the DFO for comment, but have not heard back in time for broadcast. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths have all increased in BC, and that has infectious disease specialists emphasizing the importance of going back to certain peak pandemic practices. No more isolation, but frequent hand washing and masking when sick are being recommended.
Everyone should have a generous supply of home test kits to test themselves so that we can understand where spread is occurring and how often it is occurring, and to stay home if you test positive for a certain number of days until you're better. And I think that needs to be normalized. I think if people call in sick because they have respiratory illness, then that needs to be honored.
He encourages staying home when sick with a cold or flu as well, not just after testing positive with COVID. Oh, okay, health, we're continuing. Time now to check in with Darius Madavi and a first look at the weather. Darius, temperatures have dropped a lot. I had to pull out the puffer today, the down puffer.
I saw that. You look a little bit ridiculous because it is still in the mid-teens. We have come down a little bit. It is a few degrees below where we'd usually be this time of year, but it's not puffer weather. Come on.
Oh, it's always puffer weather.
Oh, you're so Vancouver. We are a bit cooler across the province today, as we have been the last few days as that low pressure system moved through. Nothing's going to change over the next few days. Temperatures do stay a little bit down, so we're talking mid-teens across the south, a bit cooler in the north. This is usually where we'd be for places further north, like Prince George and Fort St. John, but here in the south, we'd usually be just a few degrees warmer. So this sticks around into tomorrow, into Friday and into Saturday. And then it's not until this weekend into the beginning of next week, so sort of Sunday, Monday, we might see temperatures come up a little bit, but it is a bit early to say whether that will be the case for sure. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the rain that we've still been seeing in the south coast. This morning, especially, we did have some more rain move through Vancouver into this afternoon. We have continued to see just sort of scattered showers pop up, much lighter than they were before. And we have mostly been spared on the island, which is good because later this hour we'll take a look at just how much rain we did see over the last 3 days on the island. And it is quite extraordinary, I have to say, especially for the North Island. So be ready for a little bit more rain possible tonight, overnight, and tomorrow morning, probably finishing around 8 a.m. tomorrow. And then we clear up a little bit more into the afternoon.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, I want to go back to COVID for just a moment. Health Minister Adrian Dix and Dr. Bonnie Henry are going to be providing details on masks returning to healthcare settings tomorrow, as well as updates on COVID vaccines and respiratory illness treatment. We are going to have all of those details for you tomorrow. A Haida elder's harrowing experience in a BC hospital is drawing attention once again to anti-Indigenous racism in this province's healthcare system. As Angela Sterrett reports, BC's nurses regulator is now trying to tackle the issue 3 years after the provincial government issued a damning report.
On October 19, 2021, Penny Kerrigan landed at Mills Memorial Hospital on an air ambulance flight from Haida Gwaii in agony.
I was in extreme pain.
She was wheeled into a hospital room, given Tylenol, and left alone. When a nurse attended, Penny said it was under an air of suspicion.
Maybe because I came from an Indigenous community, a small Indigenous community, I felt that they thought that I was drug seeking.
Penny also said nurses were unnecessarily rough with her while administering blood samples.
I was crying. It hurt so bad. She just didn't care. It was violent. It was absolutely violent. And I was like so traumatized.
Penny's experience laid out in a BC Human Rights Tribunal case filed the day after the visit explains how she was discharged at 11 p.m.
And I go, where am I going to go? And what am I going to do? And she says, well, didn't you have a plan? Don't you have a voucher? And I said, well, what am I going to do? She said, call a cab.
Penny spent the night in a hotel in pain and alone. Come morning, Penny didn't want to go back to the Terrace Hospital. But her daughter pressed her, even called the hospital staff, pleading with them to treat her mom better.
She promised me that they'll be good, they'll take me in, and I will see the surgeon.
Because it turns out the pain was due to a widening of her appendix. She needed to see a surgeon to get it removed, or it could burst.
The doctor came, he examined me, and he told me he was sorry that, that they had missed the what was happening. And then he did surgery on me.
Penny's human rights complaint against Northern Health alleges anti-Indigenous discrimination by hospital staff. The tribunal issued a ruling in July approving Northern Health's application to add the doctor in charge of Penny's care as a defendant. Northern Health denies discrimination against Penny and claims its treatment of her was appropriate and reasonable. But the tribunal decision says that while Northern Health denies discrimination by its staff in this case, it acknowledges a long history of racism towards Indigenous people in BC, including in medical settings, something that is also acknowledged by the College of BC Nurses and Midwives.
It's so clear, the harms that have been created by a system that is intrinsically racist. And individuals acting within that system are driven to act in that way because of the fact that the system around them supports that behavior.
Johansson is the CEO of a body that sets standards for nurses. It manages the complaints process and is responsible for curriculum in educational institutions.
How come we're not hearing more about consequences or of a new modality that will lead to these behavioral changes a little bit faster so that Indigenous people aren't being so incredibly harmed to this level?
So it's a great question, right? It's how do you shift culture? So we're influencing the curriculum in nursing and midwifery programs. We are working with the health authorities in partnership and with Ministry of Health to identify educational resources that nurses and midwives should take, must take. But it's one thing for somebody to learn something. It's another thing for them to apply that learning.
That's something that's also fundamental to Penny.
Understanding, what happened to our people is really important. You can't learn that in 2 hours or 4 hours. It needs to be in all the medical curriculum, including doctors, nurses, the hospital administration, hospital cleaning staff, everybody.
Johansson says promising changes are on the way when the new Health Professions and Occupations Act is implemented. It lists anti-Indigenous racism as a serious harm.
It actually requires registrants to demonstrate anti-racist behavior or to be non-discriminatory. So it gives more teeth, I think, and clearer certainty around what constitutes a serious harm.
Something the Minister of Health says has been a long time coming.
It's taken way, way too long. Why? Because of the depth and the impact of that racism over time. And so the current law, which we've been functioning over, of course, and people have been living in for a long time, and the current law is about 30 years. There was a predecessor law. There was a law before that for health professions. Didn't do that. And whatever we think of those times, that wasn't seen as a priority or a need at that time. And that's clearly wrong.
The new legislation passed its third reading this month and could come into effect early next year. Angela Starrett, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's 2023 wildfire season was the worst on record and the most expensive. And the types of trees we plant is part of the problem. Why that is and what we can do in our live interview after the break. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. A new organization in Calgary is cleaning up the city while providing a path for people experiencing homelessness to get back into the workforce. Joe Horwood has the story.
See how I picked that out of the crack?
Radicare Ventures started operating just last month. They hire people struggling to find traditional work for property maintenance.
Our general staff are hired from our partner agencies like Mustard Seed, Alpha House, The Alex, etc. And they get proper training on property maintenance like garbage pickup, needle disposal, bio-waste disposal, graffiti removal, pressure washing. We really serve as this transitional ground for employers so that we build these confidence in these employees so that if they do wish to pursue other careers in the future, they can use us as a reference and use the skills that they've learned from Radicare Ventures moving forward.
Besides income, Zhang says a job provides purpose.
Overall, I'm helping me, myself, and my family and the community.
One of Radicare's employees, Kevin Skanderup, says that gives people hope.
It starts putting things back into perspective, like, okay, yeah, you know what, I can have my own place, or maybe I can get a car, or maybe, you know, like, it's really nice what they've done here.
I have a lot to do, but I plan on driving a city bus for the new year.
Richard DuPont started working for Radicare last week.
If people in the community see me doing community service like that, that'll actually help me out a lot better, because I put it on my resume that I did stuff in the community, and transit is nothing but community service.
DuPont says it's the best job he's had. His only complaint, he's not working enough. But Zhang says they're hoping more local businesses hire them so they can increase their staff.
There's the piece of glass that you were looking for.
And help more people get back on their feet. Jo Horwitz, CBC News, Calgary.
Earlier in the show, we told you that the 2023 wildfire season has been the most expensive and most destructive on record. Across Canada, more than 17 million hectares of trees were lost to wildfires, more than any other year on record. Now, some in the forestry industry are saying that the types of trees that we plant and the way they are planted may be making things worse. When forests are made up of fewer types of trees, they become more vulnerable to fast-spreading fire. Joining me live to explain what this looks like in BC is John Innes, forestry professor at UBC and the Forest Renewal BC chair in forest management. John, what is it that BC is currently doing in its planting practices that just isn't working?
Well, we've had a focus on replanting for timber objectives. So we have always tried to get the most valuable species on the ground and at an optimal density that's going to create a fairly even cover of trees across the landscape that will provide timber for the mills. Unfortunately, it also provides fuel for catastrophic wildfires, and that's what we've been seeing.
Can you talk about that a bit more, that fuel? How is it that it spreads, that the fire spreads faster in a monocultural forest compared to one with a more diverse landscape?
Well, when we have a dense forest with trees with crowns that are continuous across the landscape, the fire can move from one tree to another very, very easily. If we have a mosaic of different types of trees, different ages with gaps in the landscape, then it's much more difficult for the fire to spread because it has to jump across those gaps.
What role do industries like timber production play in forest monoculture then, since, I mean, you said it's really tied to industry?
It's tied to industry, but industry is also well aware that things are changing and need to change. If they don't change, they won't have any timber for the future. So it's absolutely critical that we see a change in policy. And I think that is now beginning to happen. It will require very detailed planning, and the ministry has been experimenting with forest landscape plans that we think may be the solution to this issue. In those plans, we will actually be able to take the whole landscape, not individual stands, and actually look at things like the continuity of fuel across the landscape and the presence of landscape breaks where fires might be contained in the future.
So essentially you'd have this piece of land and you'd have sort of a design plan with various types of trees and where they go for that piece of land?
Absolutely. And then we can also work out where the best places are for infrastructure. We can work out what values are really worth protecting. Obviously, if there's human settlements, we need to protect those. If there's critical infrastructure, we need to protect those. But there may also be cultural areas that we need to protect, or ecological areas such as old growth stands that we want to protect. And if we're doing that, we need to then plan where we put our gaps, where we put the mix of species that we think is going to be most appropriate. We need to have species that are resistant to fire, as well as the species that are good for the economy.
Just really quickly before we let you go, this obviously isn't going to happen overnight. So how concerned are you about next year's fire season?
Next year could be just as bad as this year. It could be worse. It really depends on the fire weather that we get between now and then. There's still a lot of trees out there that could be burnt. Adjusting our landscape is going to take a long time. It's going to take generations. We've changed it, and we need to change it back to something that is more resilient for the future climate that we're going to be experiencing.
John Innes is a forestry professor at UBC and the Forest Renewal BC Chair in Forest Management. Thank you for joining us live tonight.
Thank you.
After the break, heartache and sorrow as some Korean Canadians adopted as orphans learn their birth parents may in fact be alive.
Where did you find them?
We found him on Kincaid Road.
And,
on the beachfront.
oh, yeah.
Robin Campbell is about to begin another day at the office. A starving, dehydrated seal needs his help.
See that he's looked after. Thanks, Cliff.
Campbell runs the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center near Parksville, a hospital which treats 700 birds and animals every year, nearly every one a victim of human activity.
I don't get very many animals brought in that have been injured naturally. Ours are usually because of mercury poisoning, lead poisoning, hit by vehicles, fried by hydro lines, gunshot. We don't get any naturally really brought in here, so those ones don't make it here.
Ah, bless your heart, Clyde.
A big part of the Wildlife Recovery Center is Phil St. Luke. He's one of several mentally challenged adults who care for the injured animals.
All right, Clyde. Yes, you're my man. I learned what I never learned before, to get the feel how to do different things with animals and just relax when he tells me. When Robin tells me, I have to listen closely because it's important to me today.
The Wildlife Center is a volunteer organization run by donations and some government assistance. Campbell and his wife Sylvia make their living caring for the adults.
Well, it's a good combination. It helps everybody all around. It helps these people because they like to be with animals. It's very soothing for them, and they like to know that they're needed and wanted themselves. Plus, of course, it helps the animals. There's some extra help there to help them to feed them.
I did really well, Ted. Wasn't watching where I was going.
Careful.
That's Peggy, and that's Bonnie, and that one over there is Gloria.
Of all the animals here, which is the one that you like the most?
These ones.
You like, why?
Because they talk a lot.
And his name is what?
Benji.
Benji, and the other one?
Benji, too.
It is the work with eagles that gives the Recovery Center its reputation. 60 bald and golden eagles came here last year. I noticed you're feeding them.
I feed them fish. Fish.
Injured eagles learn to fly again in a big barn, the largest of its kind in North America. And the center has a remarkable recovery rate.
We have to develop their muscles again. And in this building we can do this. It's a long enough flight cage where we can exercise the wings.
For this lucky eagle, he's got all the exercise he needs. 6 months after the bird was shot, Campbell is releasing him off a nearby mountain. Bob Nixon, CBC News, near Parksville.
A group of Korean Canadians adopted as orphans have learned their birth parents may be alive. They say Canada ignored the evidence of families being torn apart. A CBC investigative team has uncovered new details. Our Priscilla Kee-Sun Wang breaks down the heartache and sorrow of people coming to grips with the truth of how they got here.
My name is Kee-Sun. I also go by Priscilla. I'm a journalist and a proud Korean Canadian. Yet lately, I've been digging into a deep, dark period of our past. In the decades after the Korean War, widespread poverty and social pressures paved the way for countless babies to be sent for adoption.
Every baby in this room has been abandoned. 500 children a month are exported for adoption with government approval.
South Korea seemed to have a surplus of babies, and demand was high from Western countries. Many ended up with well-intentioned families around the world, including here in Canada. CBC News cameras were there in 1968 when the first Korean adoptees arrived in Toronto to much fanfare. Today, those toddlers are now grown adults, many naturally curious about their lineage. But what they're beginning to find is that every little clue about their origins may have been a lie.
My name is Randaray Tyndale. I'm a Korean Canadian adoptee.
My name is Michael Phil.
My name is Evelyn Forster. Angela Deepak. Jenny Hitchin-Mills.
Carl Johnson.
Jennifer Duffy. Senna Brock.
I'm a Canadian Korean adoptee, and I want the truth.
I want the truth. And I want the truth. My name is Kelly Foston, and I want the truth.
I got to grow up in this. I just shake my head and go, wow. I feel like I had a regular upbringing. I felt like one of the family. All my needs were taken care of. Did camping, did trips to Disneyland. Happy childhood.
Kelly Foston was born Yoon Soo Chun. She was adopted at the age of 4 by a family in White Rock, BC.
I grew up eating potatoes and pasta, and everything was Western. And I didn't know anything different because I couldn't remember anything about Korea.
Here in your details in the original paperwork she arrived with were scarce. Father, unknown. Mother, no record.
This paperwork was what my parents knew. They didn't know much more to tell me.
Based on what was written, Kelly grew up believing she was an orphan and that both her parents had died.
So I kept asking.
And it wasn't until recently that Kelly wanted to see if she had any family members in her birth country.
If I don't search now, I may never know what it feels like to have a blood relative. This is who I am. This is where I come from.
Despite knowing little about her past, Kelly holds on to her Korean documents so dearly. She asks if I could help her translate them. One thing I noticed, to try to find any clues. I want to talk to you about 2 words in Korean. Ki-a versus ko-a. Ki-a literally means abandoned child. In Korean, ko-a literally means an orphan. But I noticed a shift, and I want to show you this document. This is the first time that you are officially an
orphan.
An orphan on paper. How could Kelly be both an orphan and an abandoned child? Who exactly abandoned her? It took 49 years for you to get this paperwork.
Yeah.
A new document she received this spring out of the blue added to the complexity. The adoption agency told her they had found her birth father in Korea, meaning her original papers that said father no record were false.
As a adoptee trying to learn about my origins, that's a big deal. People played God. Thank you so much for doing this. because without that, I needed a Korean that I trusted.
Kelly's story is not unique. We spent months speaking to dozens of Korean adoptees. Some had more clues than others about their birth parents. Regardless, every single adoptee arrived with an orphan certificate, officially cutting them off from any family in South Korea.
My name is Kim Alexander McKay, but my Korean name is Kim Jung-soo. I was adopted in 1975, straight from Korea to East Vancouver.
And you had your original Korean documents. What did they say about you?
Well, I was left by my family. Yeah, I was abandoned on the street.
Kim McKay grew up feeling alone in the world. Why had his parents abandoned him? He lived half his life heartbroken. For a while, he didn't even know he was Korean. One day, by a miraculous fluke, his birth mother was able to track him down.
Once the DNA test came back, it was like I looked at my wife and my 2 young children. I was like, we're going to Korea. They opened the door and this woman walks in. She's pretty much knocked my kids to the side and grabbed me, and she started screaming and crying. And, you know, it was like that piece of me that was missing.
After he met his mom, she told him the true story behind his adoption.
My parents divorced, and my grandmother decided to put me up for adoption.
Kim shares his paperwork with me as well.
And right there, it says, you know, you were just found.
Yeah, they said that I was abandoned on the street, and now I know that that wasn't true either. My grandmother dropped me off, and my poor mom, she had no clue.
Kim says he's simply lucky. Having a blood bond an ocean away means the world to him. But he doesn't speak Korean. His mom doesn't speak English, meaning he can't just casually call her to chat. So I help him.
여보세요?
Amma. I want to introduce you to my friend Priscilla.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
제 이름은 황기선이고요. 지금 캐나다의 방송국에 일하는 기자예요. She says I love you.
I love you, mommy.
사랑한대요.
사랑해. It's funny because I was 49 years old, and I'm no longer an orphan. I actually belong to a family now.
Kim's mother spent 30 years wondering if her son was dead or alive and where he could be in the world. We managed to connect with her in Seoul. Seo Dong-nim talks about having her son taken away from her against her will simply because she was divorced.
깜짝 놀랐어요. 그냥 깜짝 놀래고 막 거의 한 보름 가까이 먹지도 않고 그 이후로 우리 식구들은 무슨 불문율 같이 이 정수에 대한 얘기를 아무도 안 했어요. I miss you, I love you, 우리 정수, I miss you.
The pain of what happened is still so raw. South Korean society is grappling with the painful truth of its adoption history. Children shuffled out overseas to avoid shame, adoption agencies cashing in, all of it signed off by the South Korean authorities. Lee Kyung-eun is a former director of Amnesty International Korea, who now heads up Human Rights Beyond Borders.
I would say that the relevant authorities of South Korean government worked as a factory of mass production of orphan documents.
She's calling out the deceptive tactics by both adoption agencies and government authorities.
The orphan documents were produced and issued by government authorities, but I can find no evidence that each individual case was really assessed and investigated by those authorities to figure out that those children were really orphan or not. This orphan making procedure was totally illegal. That was really a big tragedy in the history of this country.
But what about Canada? There are clues in this faded photo of a baby who was kidnapped in South Korea. The toddler was adopted into Canada and raised by a BC family. That case prompted us to dig through decades of once classified material on international adoptions at the National Archives in Ottawa. There were calls for a full-scale investigation into all Korean adoptions, but we couldn't find records of any such action. We came across old letters and telegrams raising alarm bells, some calling the kidnapping case a predicament, a serious complication.
Hi, Dad. How's it going?
Really good.
So adoptions of so-called Korean orphans kept happening, which allowed for people like Kelly Foston to arrive on our shores 4 years after that kidnapping case.
You've only scratched the surface of this. Are you finding it overwhelming?
Very much so.
It appears federal officials never directly cautioned Canadians, including Kelly's adoptive father, Jim Foston.
If I had have had the opportunity of knowing
He's now learning from his daughter that the adoption papers that were handed to him decades ago were very misleading.
My first impression when I heard this, what was that? That was like human trafficking? Are we talking about human trafficking? I was with the RCMP. I had a top secret security clearance. I wasn't going to do anything illegal that was going to jeopardize that. It just wouldn't have happened. But I would have been pissed off, livid. Would I have changed anything? No. When I think of all the memories that we have of her growing up from the time she arrived until going through school, not a snowball's chance in hell. Because look what we've got. We got Kelly, didn't we?
I can't even express it in words.
For Kelly, the bombshell discovery that she has a birth father who may still be alive brings her more anger when it should bring her joy.
I want the Canadian government to investigate. I want them to figure out and look into the cases. How could Canada have gone into agreements? Did they know about this?
Kelly longs for a relationship with her birth parents, whose whereabouts the Korean Adoption Agency appears to know, but refuses to share, citing privacy reasons.
This is sent with all my love in hopes you find the strength to move forward with me.
Kelly decides to write a letter to her birth father. It's all she can do for now.
I want to share with you that I've had a good life. I've been raised to be healthy, strong, and independent. Would you please send a letter to me? Sincerely, Kelly Foston, Yoon Soo Jung.
A 10-year-old boy celebrating his birthday at the Coldplay concert here in Vancouver got a gift he'll never forget. We'll tell you more about his star-studded moment when we come back.
The name Wagachibi Inuthe translates to clothes of the special dances. The exhibit traces the history of powwow ceremony in the Rocky Mountains from a performance at the Banff Springs Hotel in 1894 to the competitive powwows hosted in southern Alberta today.
Well, the important point is that the use of regalia, powwow, dance regalia was illegal, and people would be imprisoned for participating in this up until the 1950s. 5 regalia pieces are on display. They're made up of beaded and sewn moccasins, hair ties, and other forms of traditional dress. Historic photography spanning 100 years is also mounted for visitors.
We wanted to educate. We wanted to bring information forward. And that has always been sort of my life's work within ministry, within the United Church, and within the Canmore Museum and other venues where I'm able to talk to groups.
The museum is also hosting a dressmaking workshop tomorrow night, and Nakota artist Teresa Snow, who designed much of the collection, is offering beadwork classes to spark interest. Sharon Galpin is visiting the museum while on vacation with her family. She said the collection makes her think of her own Indigenous education in New Zealand.
I'm European, but I have a son that's, well, got children to a Maori lady, and It's quite good to know the stories of what happened in the past to try and make it better for the future.
The museum says it's received requests from other institutions to create a traveling exhibit, but much of the collection is on loan, and Nation members plan to wear some pieces in powwows next year. Brendan Coulter, CBC News, Calgary.
Coldplay was in Vancouver over the weekend, and their show is making headlines for a unique reason. Frontman Chris Martin picked a 10-year-old birthday boy named Leo out of the crowd and performed an impromptu song for him. Take a listen.
We got floor seats for my birthday. That was my birthday present. And me and my dad and my mom sort of just was like, excuse me, it's my birthday. And we were just pushing to the front. And I was on my dad's shoulders holding a big pink poster. And he was reading all the posters. And said, that young boy in the crowd, can you please come up here?
What's your name?
And he told me to wave up to the crowd. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wait, what?
What else did he do today on your birthday?
He would just ask me questions and started just making up words and was singing them.
And she's sitting with me.
And then he made a cool, good song.
I can't think of a better place to be when you turn 10.
It was just like, what? How is this happening? What is happening? Oh my gosh. It was just the best day ever.
Pretty exciting for a first concert.
What a first concert.
You a big Coldplay fan?
I do like Coldplay, yeah, it turns out. I didn't realize I was a big fan, and then my friend started playing some of their songs, and I kept being, I like this song. I didn't know that was Coldplay. So it turns out I am. What a way to have a first concert, though. Like you said, it's going to be hard to live up to after that.
I think so.
So, yeah, that's a nice, wholesome story. Then we're going to talk and turn and talk about the rain, a little bit less wholesome, because we did see some extraordinary amounts. I know we looked at this map yesterday, but again, on Sunday, most of the rain was confined to the west coast of the island. And then as we moved into Monday, that rain moved further north. So the North Island got quite a lot. If you look at the legend here, we're looking at close to 100 millimeters for some parts of the North Island. But it got worse just yesterday. We saw some incredible rainfall across the North Island, even on the West Coast once again. So up here, over the 2 days together, we're talking close to 200 millimeters of rain over that 48-hour period. So some really extraordinary rainfall did come of it. We did see those high winds gusting close to 150 or over 150 kilometers per hour for some parts of the island. So bomb cyclone, it was a pretty decent storm, although we didn't see it as much here on the Lower Mainland or for the South Island around Victoria. But it was a good amount of rainfall. That has continued somewhat, much lighter over the last 24 hours. Some of those showers breaking into the interior. So I know that Kelowna was a little bit damp this morning as well. A lot of those showers will continue into tomorrow, just sort of popping up, popping in and out. They should ease off as we head into Friday, as things mostly clear up across the province. We have another ridge of high pressure build in. Still some accumulation happening over the next 48 hours, but after that, once we get into the weekend, that's when we start to see the sun poke out a little bit more for a lot of places, especially here in the south, but definitely a lot of lighter rainfall for the island happening over the next couple of days, and it's mostly moving into the southeast of the interior that we see some significant rainfall, and in the northeast as well, around Fort St. John, just north of Fort St. John, should see some pretty significant amounts. Now for tonight, expect some more rainfall overnight, continuing into tomorrow for many places. Once again, here in Vancouver, that should ease off after the morning, so we get a bit of a sunnier afternoon, maybe some blue sky poking through the clouds, but it really is going to be sort of Saturday and Sunday that we see things really open up and we see that sun come out full blast. So should be a pretty nice weekend to be outside.
Thanks, Darius.
Thanks.
Coming up, the origins of Google in a Stanford dorm room 25 years ago and its journey to becoming the world's biggest search engine. More after the break.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. CBC Vancouver is the exclusive media partner of the Jade Music Festival, October 18th to the 20th. The festival features a variety of events that showcase Chinese-Canadian music and entertainment. And on October 21st, support youth arts education with Gloria Makarenko at Splash, Arts Umbrella's 41st annual gala and art auction. Tickets at artsumbrella.com.
Google, the search engine giant that transformed the internet, is celebrating its 25th anniversary today. Google, which is now under the umbrella company called Alphabet, was incorporated in September of 1998. Over the years, the name Google virtually replaced the phrase internet search, but the company has grown and changed from just a search engine to a multinational technology empire that includes e-commerce, business solutions, and advertising. It is valued at more than $1 trillion. Yes, that is $1 trillion. Well, happy anniversary to Google. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. We leave you with this shot of a rainbow. It's actually a double rainbow from about half an hour ago. Good night.